He sings about being held in the water, daddy pushing his head under. So I'm getting from this that, or hopefully it's a baptism scene.
Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another Friday episode here at the Audiophiles. We're getting ready for the weekend, but before things kick off, we've got a track offered up by one of you lovely listeners out there to dig into. We poured over all of the selections, and up to bat today is Me and My Arrows, and he's offered up yet another track from the Toadies, or Toadies, I should say. And it is off of their album that we've listened to two tracks from, the album Rubberneck. And the track that he's offered up for us to check out is one called Backslider, which I am very familiar with. This is one of my favorite 90s albums. So, John, I know you're not, correct? So you're going to go off and give this thing a spin?
Yeah, I shall see what the hell happens.
Excellent, excellent. Well, go do just that and come back and let me and my arrows, as well as myself and the folks out there in the listening audience, know your thoughts.
Bended knee, 9 years old, waiting for just one word. I was thinking of all the things my daddy told me of sin and salvation and manhood and dignity. All that time.
Okay, I'll go back a little bit. It's a very short song. Yeah, it starts off and it's got that sort of really simple sort of like, he sings sort of a bended knee, 9 years old, waiting for just one word, and in between you get the guitar riff. It's quite a simple one, and it has that feel of kind of classic 70s rock. And there's a bit of sort of drumming and cymbal work helping it along. And then when he finishes that, it sort of goes off for a little wander. And I'm getting the feeling here, and it's really strange. This one band name popped into my head there, and it's a band I don't know really, apart from the really obvious songs, and I've got no knowledge. But I was thinking the word Deep Purple popped into my head. Apologies if that offends anyone who's a fan of Toadies or a fan of Deep Purple. It's not based on knowledge. It's just kind of like this thing that popped into my head. So, yeah. And then it goes into a sort of verse bit where the guitar continues and it's much heavier and louder. And he then belts out. And there was something about his daddy and salvation and dignity. So I'm guessing the phrase backslider has a religious overtone here. We'll see. Let's just go back a little bit. That's not it.
Bended knee, 9 years old, waiting for just one word.
It's this bit here. That do 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 do. It may not be Deep Purple, but it kind of has that 70s rock sort of feel about it. That progression, in my opinion.
I was thinking of all the things my daddy told me of sin and salvation and manhood and dignity. All that time in the dark.
Light and shade.
Just one word. Backslider.
if you take the vocals aside, this bit here where they're all sort of playing together, as it were, the drums really sort of punching it through, and it's almost sort of glam rocky in a way. Yeah, there's some interesting things. He says something about all this time in the dark, and then Backslider. So I don't know. Does that mean spiritually in the dark and then coming to light? Or I guess horrible feeling it's more like punishment or abuse being kept in the dark. Maybe, maybe not. These religious tales never end up good. That's nice.
Son, I am so proud. Just one word. Backslider!
So he says there, I'm sure he said, "Son, I am so proud." Just one word, Backslider. I'm not really sure what's going on there. As his daddies hold him in the water, so there's this baptism thing going on, I guess. And he says that, but Backslider, surely, is that like a dig? Or is it him thinking that his dad is actually the backslider, and like this sort of religious hypocrisy that you get from these sort of men of God who turn out to have like a massive coke habit and a particular penchant for cool girls, etc., and embezzlement. I don't know. It's interesting though. Yeah, right at the end there was a little bit of sort of very tiny sort of hint of more modern rather than 70s guitar sounds, a little bit of a wail and a snarl. Yeah, so I guess from that, I think he said he saw Jesus and then he asked Jesus, "Don't let me be a backslider, or become a backslider." So I'm thinking the narrator doesn't want to become one, so he isn't one yet. So the backslider must refer to dear old puppy. Anyway, who knows? Well, perhaps Andy does. But yeah, it's quite enjoyable. That was like 70s rock, with a bit of sort of glam in there as well, punching away. Um, like, yeah, interesting. We need to find out more. So let's go back and chop it up with Andy.
All right, so you have returned. You backslid into some more Toadies. What did you think of this track, Backslider?
But first of all, I have to say, me and me arrows. I don't know why, but it just reminded me of me and my mum, my dad, and my gran. We're off to Waterloo. Me, my mum, my dad, and my gran. and a bucket of Vindaloo. Anyway, so my understanding of the term backslider would come from American pop culture because it's not a term which I've ever heard used outside of your hallowed shores, particularly not over on this side of the pond. So in my mind, I think it would refer to a sinner, like a recidivist, or an apostate. And I've got this feeling that it's usually used more in strong religious overtones. So anyway, we find out. So the song kicks off. It does quickly determine the frame of reference for Backslider. So we get Bended Knee, 9 years old, waiting for just one word. Now, if it weren't for the 9 years old bit, I'd be thinking of something quite a bit darker. But this is definitely a religious setting. However, knowing Catholic priests, that first thought could still be a thing. So the guitar riff is very, very simple, and it's doing its stuff in between the vocal lines, backed by some splashy percussion. So, and at the end of the verse, those first four lines, the guitar just kind of wanders off like it's been distracted by something shiny, and the chord progression that it does felt to me very sort of like heavy 70s rock. And then a band name popped into my head. And it's another one of these cases where, you get your apologies in beforehand. I don't know why this band popped into my head because I am not in the slightest way familiar with their oeuvre. And that band is Deep Purple. But it felt like, and I thought maybe Black Knight. It's kind of like that, but there's a bit of Zeppelin does that sometimes, that sort of progression-y thing, you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. I can't really back this notion up in any way. It's just a thing from the recesses of my barely functioning brain. So we then rumble on to the next verse where it all goes up a notch. The guitars sort of linger throughout, and the singer who's delivering a fairly constrained first verse hits his stride with full voice. He mentions stuff about his daddy and salvation and dignity. We then get more light and shade, and this thing goes on there's a short song, but it goes in a sort of recurring pattern. So you get light and shade, or loud, quite loud. As we return to the original sort of setup of quieter vocals punctuated by the guitar riff. And he says something about all that time in the dark. Just one word, backslider. These bits of the song are easy for me to pick up the lyrics, obviously. Interesting though, the words like all the time in the dark. I wondered what that meant, whether that was a spiritual meaning about being in the dark and then, I found the light or I've seen the light. But I don't know why, but I also get this sense of punishment, like being put into the dark. And I wonder if he's been accused of being a backslider religiously. On the word, as he delivers backslider, the singer gives a bit of welly. And we also get this sort of drive-by rumble from one of the guitars that sort of underlines the word nicely. It's like, wow, coming through. Get a bit more Deep Purple, and then we go on to the next verse. And it's the same pattern again, full on guitars, full on vocals and full on guitars. Really nice sort of drumming. It's quite punchy in places here when we're all playing. The drumming's really punchy, and it kind of makes me feel. And I think I had this from the song before. It's almost like a bit of glam rock in there as well, along with the other stuff. He sings about being held in the water, daddy pushing his head under. So I'm getting from this that well, hopefully it's a baptism scene. Otherwise, it's even darker than I thought. Again, we get more 70s rock vibe, and it comes out of this into this very nice, isolated riff, which is really sweet. And then the drums return, so it's just the guitar and the drums, which again really screams of that classic 70s rock style. But it's really nice as well. And then we get this quite odd verse here. He says, so I'm sure he says, son, I'm proud. Just one word, Backslider. So is Daddy praising him and then getting a dig in with the backslider? Or is it a warning or an admonishment? Or is it that the narrator perhaps is thinking backslider about his father? So I get the idea that his dad is holding him and put his head in the water and saying he's proud. So his dad is potentially, I think, a religious figure of sorts. And then you get this potential for hypocrisy with men of God and their proclivities for cocaine, call girls, and embezzlement, um, and then crying about it on TV and asking for more money. Um, yeah. So then we get more images of the baptism. I think he says about he through the water he can see Jesus or something, and then he offers up a prayer saying, "Don't let me become a backslider." So then I'm thinking from that, well, the narrator then is saying that he doesn't want to become a backslider, so he doesn't consider himself one. So I think the backslider may very well refer to his father, um, perhaps. That's my guess. We get sort of in the last we get a nice sort of a more guitar riffage and splashy drums. And then the last 10 seconds or so, there's a nice sort of wailing, distorting, and almost grungy sound that sounds but more modern. Just the last 10 seconds that hints of like 90s guitar rather than 70s. So yeah, overall this is really interesting. I remember vaguely the previous song,
I Come from the
I
Water.
Come from Water, yeah. That had a bit of a sort of a retro sound to it, and I remember thinking there was a bit of sort of almost glam rock sound to it. This one definitely had that sort of 70s rock sound to it in a way, and a bit of glam in terms of like the propulsion from the drumming. Um, and his voice was definitely had a bit of a throwback to the 70s.
Yeah,
Well,
without question.
so yeah, I enjoyed it. It was I'm not sure how more or less. I don't know. I'd have to listen to the other one again. But yeah, it's interesting, a very punchy song as well, and I'm very interested to hear about what the hell's going on as well.
Yeah. This is the third track by them that we've covered on this channel. So all from this album. So we've really, put a decent dent in it, all things considered. I'm really glad you like this one. I'm sure that Me and My Arrows is happy too. Yeah, it's a really great track off this album. I remember I think the first I heard this album probably for the first time in like 95 or 6. It wasn't immediately after its release. I was still pretty young, but I started the obviously Possum Kingdom was getting a lot of radio play, and then I heard this track in a film called Black Sheep, a Chris Farley comedy film. Um, and I just remember thinking like, God damn, that's a good song. Who is it? And then I looked on the back of the album. I was like, oh shit, it's on this album. So I went and gave it a listen. And yeah, it's just one more reason why this album is so good. It's just track after track of some really good sounding stuff. So yeah, quick recap of the band. They're an alt rock outfit from hailing from Fort Worth, Texas, formed in 1989, which is why I wore my Frisco Rough Riders hat. Part of the DFW down there, the Dallas Fort Worth area. And as mentioned, this is our third episode dedicated to one of their tracks, which means they've graduated to having a playlist dedicated to their episode. So I've created that and linked it down in the description field below in this episode. So if you want to go back and check out any of those, please feel free to. There's a whole Toadies chunk of music waiting there for you to listen to. Before the 1994 release of their first full-length album, the aforementioned Rubberneck, on which this track and I Came from the Water and Possum Kingdom all feature, the band recorded a few cassettes and self-releases, as well as an EP titled Pleather, before signing to Interscope Records. The band's lineup at this time included Vaden Todd Lewis on rhythm guitar and vocals, Daryl Herbert on lead guitar, Lisa Umbarger on bass and baritone guitar, and Mark Resnicek on drums and percussions. Featuring a sound described as distinctly grunge and distinctly Texan, Rubberneck included 6 singles: Possum Kingdom, Mr. Love, Away, Tyler, Backslider, and I Come from the Water. So here we are now having covered half of the total singles output from this album, which is pretty impressive when any album can generate 6 singles. The album attained RIAA Gold and Platinum status in December of 1995 and the December of 1996, respectively. And in an article for AllMusic, writer Chris Steffen noted the following. For many fans of 90s rock, the Texas-based band the Toadies were summoned by their biggest hit, Possum Kingdom, from their 1994 album Rubberneck. Back in Texas, it was a different story, as nearly half the songs from the album, including Away, Backslider, I Come From the Water, and Tyler, became regional staples and helped drive the album to platinum status. The album peaked at number 54 on the US Billboard 200 and number 1 on the US Billboard Heat Seekers chart. In a 2014 article entitled Rubbernecking at the Toadies, Bug-Eyed Masterpiece, Chris Gray would write the following. Some albums don't grow old gracefully because they were never graceful to begin with. The Toadies' Rubberneck is rude, blasphemous, unstable, cathartic, and possibly murderous, but graceful it is not. One of the angriest rock albums to be released by a Texas artist in the 90s, it is also arguably the most successful. And almost 20 years removed from its August 1994 release, it sounds like it's hardly aged a day. Rubberneck is an account of personal experiences, first or secondhand, of frontman and principal songwriter Vaden Todd Lewis, who had been working in a record store on the west side of Fort Worth and started the Toadies with a couple of his co-workers, aiming for a group along the same lines as the Sex Pistols, Pixies, and Talking Heads. In other words, nervy, artful, and perhaps a little snotty. Lewis cycled through several musicians, but drummer Mark Reznicek is now the only other remaining member from the Toadies' formative days. Adding Rubberneck is as loaded with juicy stories as it is jagged riffs and ZZ Top style boogie. Almost every song make a vivid, if lurid, graphic novel. Topics include peeping toms on Tyler, broken friendships on Quitter, evangelical Christianity on I Come From the Water, a creepy figure stalking a popular North Texas lake in Possum Kingdom, infuriatingly glib people in their track Happy Face, the fickle DFW music scene, Mr. Love, and more metaphysical matters in a way. But far and away, one of the most pivotal songs on the album is Backslider, where Lewis confronts his strict religious upbringing with no small amount of spite. I think that a lot of the songs were his way of getting it out of his system, says Reznicek. So, let's jump into these lyrics. Bended knee, 9 years old, waiting for just one word. I was thinking of all the things my daddy told me of sin and salvation and manhood and dignity. All that time in the dark, just one word, backslider. I remember the day I stepped into the water. My daddy held me in his hands and pushed my head under and said, son, I am so proud. Just one word, backslider. Well, I opened my eyes and my daddy held me in his hands. I looked up through the water and thought I saw Jesus. And then, well, I threw up my hands and I heard amen. And I prayed, sweet Jesus, don't let me become a backslider. So, Backslider is the third track on the album and is about the narrator's father and his faith. To be a backslider, as you were keen to point out, means to revert back to non-Christian ways. In the video, the father is portrayed as the backslider, identifying as Christian while often reverting to negative habits. In the documentary Dark Secrets, The Stories of Rubberneck, Vaden Todd Lewis would expand on the meaning of the track and its inspiration by saying, Backslider was one of the last songs I wrote before recording Rubberneck, but also one of the most revealing because it's about a personal experience. That song's about being a kid and being brought up in a religious household and just the anxiety and fear and sheer terror that that brought on. It was one of the earliest songs that I actually got into something really personal rather than writing a fictional story or just out of absolute spite. So, there you go. You were pretty keen to catch on to the subject matter, and you were accurate. Yeah, it's about which is interesting, right? Because the father at the time of the baptism and during Vaden Todd Lewis's youth, his biggest fear, hypocritical as it is, was probably for his son to revert to or become sort of this non-Christian, to backslide from the faith that he's
Either.
been indoctrinated in. And then, of course, he, the model himself, fell victim to the fear that he had superimposed on his son. So yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, the hypocrisy of the uber pious, and overtly faithful, uh, never ceases to amaze anyone at this point. I mean, we see it all the time. So here's a classic example summed up in a short little rock song that covers just that. So
Yeah, I mean this is the whole issue with organized religion. I mean, a bloke who pretty almost certainly did exist, who may or may not have had a mental illness, said, "Why don't we just be nice to each other?" And that's something which everyone, and then all the other bullshit, is invented. Don't wear that on your cock, and don't eat those, animals and all that sort of thing. It's
yeah,
just, oh, you can beat your wife because they're, and they're subhuman, and yeah, well, that's fucking nonsense, isn't it? It's amazing how much misery is caused by that. I mean, the one of the great things about this country is the Church of England, which is set up by some guy who just wanted to get his end away with somebody else. Um, um, and the Church of England is just not taken seriously. It's almost religion for people who aren't religious.
yeah,
Um, it's kind of a national joke. But across the short hop, we have the island of Ireland and the amount of misery that the Catholic Church definitely cause over there. Single mothers, adoptions, just the treatment of children in
yeah,
religious schools by these vicious Nazis that they call nuns. Um, I mean, yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
crazy. But yeah,
Well,
really interesting song. Really interesting song.
yeah, it manifests in a different way, but there's still, ironically, sadly, ironically, a lot of evil rooted in some of that behavior. No matter if it's on over there or down in Texas, it will show itself inevitably, and it often
Yeah,
does on repeat. So, yeah, it is an interesting song, interesting subject matter. Kind of not too far off from "I Come from the Water." The "I Come from the Water" seemed a bit more defiant. In the face of Christianity, this seems to be just a little personal excerpt, probably that helped educate the epiphany of "I come from the water," or at least that personal stance, because how can you buy into something that produces failure and evil doing after the other? You know what I mean? So you kind of want to just wash your hands of it, kind of baptize your hands of it, if you will. But yeah, interesting stuff. Great shout out, me and my arrows. Good. Obviously, I'm a big fan of this album. John's now heard 3 of the 6 singles off the off the album, so I'm sure, John, you're starting to get a pretty good perspective of Toadies and their sound, and seems like you're appreciating it. So that's good. That's good.
yeah, definitely,
Cool.
definitely.
Cool, cool. Well, guys out there in the listening audience, please let us know what you thought of this track. Feel free to drop down any other suggestions by this band or any other in this comment field or any of the other comment fields on our videos on the channel. We'll be sure to add them to our ever-growing list for Friday episodes. Also, please like, share, and or subscribe if you haven't done any or all of those things. It doesn't cost you a dime, and it only costs you 2 seconds of your time. So thank you so much, and hopefully John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. Have a great weekend, guys.